Okay, this is Mark, and this is a tutorial on how to make something like this for VRChat. We're actually going to make something simple. We'll make an ice cream cone, and we're going to do it in ZBrush. So this is just in Blender, so you can see how it looks rendered. The quality of the texture here is much more different than what you'll see in ZBrush because I've updated the textures using Photoshop. So we can go over that maybe later as well. But here you can see sort of how the avatar turned out. And it was pretty difficult to make. The major problem that I came up across was that there really weren't any sort of tutorials on how to do it. And also, like with reducing poly counts and all that, there's a lot of information out there on YouTube, but it's kind of hard to understand. So I'm gonna try to simplify everything for everybody so that you can make something like this yourself. Okay, so what we're gonna talk about in this video in ZBrush is how to utilize ZBrush to make something like a game asset, such as an avatar, or something like a prop, like a sword, or really anything that you want to import into VRChat that is a 3D shape that is textured and exported, and that you can actually use in the game while keeping your poly counts low. So we're going to learn how to reduce the poly counts, also how to get a nice high quality paint texture on there, and UV unwrapping and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be from A to Z, but it's not going to be weight painting. It's not going to be adding bones or anything like that. That's all done in Blender. This is simply a video about making the sculpture and being able to import it into Blender for further work. Now you can see here on this model that it has a lot of geometry, 6.068 million points. Okay, but it's not actually that bad. It's about 96,000 actually points. Now I didn't reduce the topology as much as I could, and so this was my first attempt at trying to do this, and it was a partial success and a partial failure in that I didn't, I should have reduced the poly count, and I could actually go back and fix all those problems. So anyway, let's get started. We're gonna actually make an ice cream cone and show you guys the same basic principles in the same order and steps to get to this kind of a character if you wanted to take it in a more complicated way. Okay, so the very first step is to create something and to sculpt it, and we're gonna go up to Lightbox. And we're going to go to Dynamesh Sphere and double click. I'm not going to save my other project. So this is the first step. So as you can see, we've got a lot of geometry here. We get a lot of maybe some tris and quads in here. We've got like just everything is kind of a jumbled mesh, and also a jumbled mess. It's pretty bad. This is not something that you can just import into VRChat. I mean, you could, but the number of points is 43,000, and you're supposed to actually stick to about 70,000 for an entire avatar. So for our ice cream cone, we're going to make the ice cream with this sphere. I'm going to go to my subtool first, and I'm going to duplicate this. So let's duplicate that twice. 1, 2. Now I'm going to go back to my brush, click T for transpose. Make sure that my bottom sphere is selected. Now I'm going to move it down. And I'm going to move it over. I'm just going to click on, so I got to click X to make sure that I'm not in symmetry mode. And I'm going to click it over here. Then I'm going to do the same to this one, this sphere. I'm going to move it up. And I'm actually going to move it up a little bit higher, maybe about here. Again, Control Z to undo. So if you see something like this, click Control Z a couple of times and click X to turn off symmetry mode. And you can sort of move it around. Get it to where you think the ice cream would be on an ice cream cone. So I'm going to go with like 3 scoops. That's pretty good. And now I'm going to go to Append here on my subtools. Just Append. And I'm going to click on Cone 3D. I'm going to click it, make sure it's selected, and move it down, and I'm going to just rotate it by clicking on this little circle, something like this. And I'm going to click on this little box, or I don't know what you want to call this. It's like a rectangle or something. And I'm going to resize it a little bit. So we can size it down, we can size it up, we can lengthen it. These are all basic shapes. You know, this is not anything really complicated. So we got, you know, our 3 scoops of ice cream, and actually we can duplicate this top one, move it up, and I'm going to click on this little yellow square, shrink it down, move it like this, and that's going to be our cherry. So this is a really simple project, like I said. So we have just 4 spheres and a cone, and I use the transpose tool to put them in place like that. So really easy to actually do something like this, right? Super simple. So the next stage is to just go through and sculpt each one of these spheres. And I am going to go back to the inflate. So I'm going to click on brush. I can either press I and find inflate and click it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around. I'm going to click X, turn symmetry mode back on. And I'm just going to kind of go around, and I'm going to turn off my my polyframe here. Just clicking this. I'm going to go around and inflate some areas around here to emulate what like a scoop of ice cream would look like. So like the end of your scoop kind of bulges out, kind of melts a little bit, goes over the edge. And I'll do that to all 3 of these. So for this one I did turn off symmetry because the symmetry was not, this is more of an angle that I want this to be at. So I'm just gonna go like this. So if I had symmetry mode on, you can see that it would be like that. Right, so that won't work. So again, I just press X to turn on and off symmetry mode. And it's gonna go around. Something like this. Maybe we got like a little bit of drip here, you know. It is ice cream after all. And then I'm gonna go down to, where's the other one? Here. Yeah, okay. Do the same thing here. Just kind of go around. So here's our ice cream cone. Really simple. Again, if you want to add drips or whatever, feel free. Just using the inflate tool and my mouse. And so there we have pretty much an ice cream cone, right? Pretty simple, nothing fancy. I can go in here and maybe adjust things, like maybe inflate this just a little bit. Maybe this one, inflate it just a tad if I want. And so yeah, I mean, that's really it. So we've now sculpted an ice cream cone. So the next part is to reduce the poly count, and in order to do that, we need to let's make the visible subtool count 6 here, just so we can see all these. And this one is the cherry, so I'm going to move this up top, just to kind of keep things in order. Okay, so all my subtools are in order with regards to the actual model. So the next part is to reduce the poly count. So now if I click on our polyframes here, again you can see this is, for this cherry, teeny tiny cherry like this has 43,360 active points, and that's very bad. So the first thing we need to do, like once we're satisfied with whatever we've sculpted, this could be, like I said, an avatar, could be a prop, could be anything. The next step is to reduce that poly count down as much as we can while still creating something that has the same shape that we started with. And so what I like to do is I like to go down to, so let's see, we're going to go down to geometry. And then we're going to go to ZRemesher. And I'm going to click on it as half and to see what it does. Let's see. So we click it, So we have 43,000 active points, and what's it going to be when we're done? It should be like 20 something, right? Alright, so we have 20,216. So, and you can see that the geometry is a little bit nicer too. So I'm going to click it again with half selected. Adapt is, I have adapt on, which is fine. And we should have about 10. So we got like 9. And I'm going to click it again. See what happens here. Got 3. 1,797. And what happens next? That's not too bad still. So what I'm doing is I'm reducing it by half. And I'm just seeing if the shape is okay or if it ends up turning out to be too geometric shaped, right? So that won't be good. So we're going to click it once more. Shape is still not too bad. It's starting to get a little bit chunky. There's a lot of facets there. Click it one more time. Still pretty acceptable. One more time. And this is about as far as I think we should go. In fact, I'm going to undo that. So we got about 181 active points. That's not too bad for a cherry. So this looks good. So again, like if we go forward, you can see that it's getting reduced a real lot to where you can sort of see all these little points sticking out as opposed to this, which is a little bit more round. So this is good enough. So we're going to do the same thing to our ice cream now. And we're just going to click on Geometry, Half, under ZRemesher, and then click the ZRemesher button. I'm going to keep counts. This is 1, because we want them all to be about the same. So clicking it once, waiting for it. Takes a little while. Clicking it twice. Three times. 4 times. 5. And that looks about good to me. That's probably about, let's look at one more time. 6. That's still okay though. Let's try 7. Okay, now I'm starting to lose detail along the bottom, so I'm going to Control Z. And that's as far as I'm going to go right there. So 6 times. So I'm going to do the same thing to both of these subtools below it. So I select it, Geometry, Half, ZRemesh. Okay, so when you ZRemesh, if you do that, you click ZRemesher, and what you see is kind of like the whole thing goes in half like that. It means you had symmetry on. So what you want to do is just make sure that you press X, turn it off, and click ZRemesh again, and it should be okay. Again, we're going to do this 6 times. Okay, so now for the cone, we're going to look at that and see what it looks like. Now it's only 482 points, so it's already pretty low. The only thing I would do at this point is, after you ZRemesh everything, is to just, I'm going to take my move tool, so I'm going to click on my brush and then M and select move. And I'm going to go through each one of these and just see if I can define the shapes a little bit nicer. So when we ZRemeshed it, a lot of the detail here was removed. And so we can just kind of move things in and out, sort of like this, if we want to, just to kind of make sure that that lower edge does have kind of that bulge. Sort of like this. And we could even, for this, like, have a drip or something if we wanted. But this one already has a drip, so we'll just kind of work with what we have. But I just want to like click on whatever subtool I want to work on and just sculpt on it a bit. So this is the first thing you want to do with regards to lowering your poly count, and then making sure that it does look like you want it to. Okay, so the next thing I want to do here is I want to merge all our stuff together. And so you might say, well, if I merge it all together, I can't work on all these parts. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have polygroups selected for that particular merged object. So I'm going to click merge down and click always OK. Merge down, merge down, merge down. Okay, so you can see what this does is each one of these colors is a different polygroup. And if you go down to polygroups, you can click on auto groups. So if two of these are the same color, click the auto groups and it'll be different for you. So we can just select random colors, doesn't really matter. But it's always going to make sure that when you merge all your tools together that it gives you a different color for each one. And if I click Control Shift and hold it and then left click on any of these, I can isolate it. So I can work on this and then click Control Shift and then click on an empty space and it all comes back. So this is how you kind of work on different areas of your model, like that. So Control Shift click outside and it comes back. So if I want to work on just the ice cream cone, again, Control Shift click on the ice cream cone and voila. So what I want to do is I want to reduce the poly count, and we're going to use our ZModeler brush to do that. And as you can see here, we have a lot of quads, and we could probably delete about half of these easily. So what I'll do is I will hover my, let me do it here. If I hover with the ZModeler selected as my brush or my tool, you get different options here. You can see there's Q mesh, a poly, there's insert edge loop, alt equals delete edge loop. You have also like a yellow line, like it goes around in a circle around a central point. Now we also have this, which is insert edge loop. Going. It doesn't really matter which line you select. So it could be vertical or horizontal. Now we also have move points, right? So we have a point option. So what I want to do is I want to click on space while I have it right on this line, so it turns white. Click space, and I click delete, edge loop complete. Now if I hover over it, you'll see that it reverses from, instead of inserting edge loop, to delete edge loop, right? That's the first option. So I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, well, this edge loop here could probably be deleted, right? So you notice we have, as our active points, 482. I'm going to just click that and delete it. There we go. Took a few clicks. So now we have 466, right? So let's skip one, go to the next one. 450 active points. Skip this one, go to the next one. 434 active points. Skip that one, go to the next one. And just keep on clicking, skipping over each one. And you'll see that we're going to reduce our poly count quite a bit. And this is what we want. Let's kind of zoom in here. Just delete that one. Oops. Okay. So now we have 242 active points. So we know our poly count's reduced quite a bit. With this column, we could actually probably delete it even more. I don't think it would really hurt. The only thing I'm worried about is in the polypainting mode, if that's going to work well or not. So I'm going to keep it at 242 points. So again, I'm going to click Shift off to the canvas. I see everything now again. Let's click Control Shift click on our ice cream. Zoom in. Now if we do something like that where we delete edge loops on here, it might get messed up. So I'm going to click Control Z. Because we've already reduced this quite a bit, and these are not even polys or quads. There's a lot of stuff going on here, which is where the line goes around things, and then there's there's maybe quads in here, and there's also other tries. It's a quad. But it just doesn't like it, as you can see. And I don't really understand why it does that. I think it's just trying to fill in holes somehow, or I don't really know. But you can get to a point where you've reduced the poly count so much and that the topology is so uneven that you really can't use this method. But there is another way to reduce polys. So I'm going to click Control-Shift off to the side, and I'm going to look around this this lower piece of geometry, this ice cream, and I'm going to look at the bottom and see where these two parts converge. So we can see that this line right here, just past it, is where things converge. So if I click Control and Shift and onto the ice cream, I can now click hover over a quad, okay? So if I hover over it, I'm going to click space, I'm going to click on delete, and I'm going to click on, I believe it's a single poly. Let me see what that does. Yes, okay. So see what just happened is I've literally deleted this piece of geometry. So if we do that in a lot of, whoops, if we do that in a lot of places, the one problem that you'll have is that you can't see anything beyond it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to down here to display properties. I'm going to click on double. So now I can see the inside of this ice cream. And I'm going to click Control Shift off to the side. And again, I'm going to look at where these two converge. Control Shift my ice cream again. And I'm going to just start deleting whatever I, oops. Well, I just deleted that edge loop complete and it didn't destroy the model. At least for a second there. Anyways, I'm going to start deleting these quads. And you'll notice that our active points again, as you know, we're trying to reduce our poly count, are going down for each one that I delete. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've deleted all of these from the bottom. And we're going to Control Shift click off to the side, and we're going to look at where it actually connects to this the second blob of ice cream, and we can Control Shift click that again, and with delete a poly selected with the ZModeler brush, just go in here and delete them from this side as well. Okay, so that's the basic process of reducing your poly count. It's reduced quite a bit, and that will actually help you know, with trying to import these things into VRChat and making sure that everything is nice and fast for you and nice and smooth. So once we reduce the poly count, what we need to do next is the UV unwrapping, and so there's generally a lot of problems with trying to do this, and sometimes what will happen is if you have a lot of complicated geometry, you won't be able to actually UV unwrap this at all. So one of the things we can do is we can go to Z plugin UV unmaster, click unwrap, okay, and we can, if there's any errors, a lot of times it will pop up. And if there are, you may end up needing to go into geometry and then going back into ZRemesher and trying to click something like same and then ZRemesh. Let's separate these parts. I'm gonna go to split into parts, okay, for my subtool, because we merged them together into one. So let's click into split into parts. And so what we have is we have a lot of parts separated as we had from the beginning. And we're going to isolate each individual part. So we're going to start with the cherry is here. Let's move that up. Let's move the cone down as well, kind of organize this. So we'll start at the top cherry. We'll go to Z plugin, UV master here, and click unwrap. Now if you get an error message, you know that you have a problem with that particular subtool. Then we can click down to the next one. If there's no problems with the first one, go to the next one. Z plugin, UV master, unwrap. Again, if there's no problem, let's move on to the next one. So this one here, if it was in the proper order, to be somewhere around there. But anyway, I'm gonna click on this and go to ZPlugin UV Master Unwrap. Check for errors. No errors. But let's say with the cone, like I said before, if you can come to the cone and you go ZPlugin Unwrap, and it gives you an error message. Then again, what you want to do is you want to go into geometry and click on same and ZRemesher. Let's do that now. Okay, so it should have the same number of points roughly. If it doesn't, if things get messed up, you can always go back into your ZModeler brush like this. ZModeler, and delete your edge loops. Okay. The other thing you can do, a lot of times the geometry of a part will be twisted. So let me get my move brush. And particularly something like this where we have, like if we have hair and the tip of the hair is kind of shaped funky like this. And you don't see it because it's, let's say, embedded into like the head of your character or something. If the geometry is really messed up and chunky like this, a lot of times you can't unwrap it. So let's try to go to ZRemesher, ZPlugin, UV Master, and unwrap. And then we're also going to check it out. So let's go to ZRemesher, UV Master, and then flatten. And I'm going to click Control Shift and click on the flattened part, which is hidden. Oh, that's right. It's not all merged. So I can click Solo and see what it looks like. So look at this here. This is where we have an issue. We have twisted out the end of our ice cream cone, so it looks really bad. And so when you try to paint this with Polypaint, it doesn't come out nice. Okay, so you want your geometry to be nice and clean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click ZPlugin UV Master Unflatten. We're going to look at it, and we're going to take the tip and we're going to smooth out the tip. But instead of using our brush and just clicking Shift and Smooth, I'm going to click on Shift to Smooth. I'm going to left click on the tip once. I'm going to hold the left click in, release Shift, and then smooth it out that way. What it does is it relaxes the geometry. It doesn't smooth it, it relaxes it, and it gives the geometry more uniform spacing of all of your quads. So if we go to, I could probably make this a little bit nicer by moving it so it's a little bit more straight, like that. Okay. Then I'm going to go back to ZPlugin, Unwrap, then ZPlugin, Flatten, and now here's what it looks like on the tip. So remember before, this geometry was all like horrible looking, and now it's a lot more uniform and much more pretty. So that's what we want. So again, ZPlugin, UV Master, Unflatten. Okay. Now one thing I did here, so when we did what we did before with Z-remeshing things, is we've got more of these lines in here, so we can go back into our ZModeler, recheck to see if things are the same or different. We can delete geometry and make sure it looks uniform. Maybe delete some of these, like so. And we got nice low active points. We've got clean geometry. And so now what we can do again is once we fix those problems, if there were any, we want to make sure that we merge everything back down again. I'm going to click Solo here to make everything visible again. I'm clicking F twice to make it fit my screen. So I'm going to merge these parts down. So I start at the top, click on my top subtool, click on Merge, merge down until everything is merged. So now we have polygroups, we have reduced topology, And we know that the UV issues were, you know, let's say we had messed up geometry, are now fixed. So now we click on Z plugin. We can turn off symmetry as well. We don't need symmetry on. And then we click on unwrap. Okay, so if you have symmetry, you can keep it on, but this does not have symmetry, right? Because we have, you know, ice cream going this way, going that way. And then we're going to click on Z plugin, flatten, and we're going to look at what we have. So it looks pretty good, right? Not too bad. However, there's one issue, and that might be that there might be seam lines where we don't want them. So we're going to click Z plugin, unflatten. Then we're going to do something that will make our geometry a little bit better before we move on to the next step. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to, let's see, so we're going to go to Z plugin, UV master, enable control painting. And we're going to click that. And after we click that, we're going to click attract from ambient right here. Now I'm going to turn off my polyframes, and you'll see what we have is a kind of gradient of blue and white. What that does is it kind of predetermines where the seam lines would look nicest for your model. Now this is like the most basic way to do it. It's automated, and so a lot of times it works. But if you want to not have an area that will have seams, let's say around here on the ice cream, let's say in the center, we want that to be where there's no seams at all. What we can do is we go into, we want to click on paint in our tools, click paint. For whatever reason, you have to do that. It's not, it doesn't automatically select it when you go to your protect and erase. I don't know why, but what we'll do is we'll make our brush size a little bit big, and we'll just start painting. So what this will tell ZBrush is we don't want to have a seam line in this part of our model before we finish it. So that when it's unwrapped and when we paint it, there won't be like an unsightly sort of line going through our model. Now it might work, it might not, but we'll try. So again, we'll just paint here. We'll protect these areas. You know, if there's a seam line underneath these parts, you know, who cares, right? Doesn't matter. Or we can even try to, you know, like for here, if we want to have a seam line at the back of our ice cream right there, we could go to Z plugin, click on attract, and then we're just going to attract a, you know, let's make it smaller. But we'll attract a seam line here. That's probably a good spot for it. Again, protect this part. We don't want seam lines. And something like this. And if we have for like a certain character that we have for VRChat or whatever, and we know that the ice cream is going to be held a certain way, and the hand is going to be blocking this part of the ice cream cone, we can actually go in here and go, you know, Z plugin, attract, make our size small, and put a seam line right where we want it here. And once you do that, you go to Z plugin, and then you want to click on unwrap. So again, I have symmetry turned off because it's not symmetrical. There we go. And we'll go back to Z plugin and check by clicking on flatten. And there we have it. So you can see with our ice cream cone, what it's done is it's added that seam line right where we wanted it here. And again, this is probably pretty good. So we can even Control Shift click on our ice cream cone and select it, check it out, zoom in, see if our geometry that we faced on the tip of the cone is nice, which it is. All right, so everything looks pretty good. Control Shift click off to the side. And we're happy with this. Now what we can do is we can paint it. And so we're going to go back to Z plugin, unflatten, and we're in paint mode, right? So we can either paint this with paint, or we can use more advanced tools. But well, let's see. The first thing we got to do is we need to divide our model up. So we're going to go to geometry and divide it. So I'll do it 1, 2. Subdivisions up to 5 levels here, okay? So if we look at it, we've added tons of geometry. It has smoothed out the model. If I click on BPR, we've got shadows. Right, that's pretty cool. What we could do is we could still Control Shift and click parts, such as the cherry. So let's start with the cherry. I'm going to select red, something like this. Then I'm going to click on Control Color, and then Fill Object. And then with the paintbrush tool, I can go in there and I can select, I can click on this here, this red color, and select a lighter color. And then I can just go in and I can highlight this cherry. So I'm going to take my intensity down to about 30 and then 25, and then just kind of expand it and highlight that cherry. So we got a nice little highlight. If we wanted to have like a little white shiny part, select like a lighter color, come in there and just go like that. I'm going to click Control Shift click off to the side. Control Shift click on our ice cream here, and I'm going to select a kind of minty green color. Color, Fill Object. Could be a little bit darker, so select the darker color. Color, Fill Object. Select let's say a lighter color, and I'm going to highlight it. Now again, I didn't reduce the geometry on this ice cream here. You could do that yourself to make the quad count a lot smaller. Control Shift click off to the side, see what we got. Now let's get like a chocolatey brown color. Control Shift click this ice cream. Color, Fill Object. That's a bit light, right? And that's because of my intensities up here. So I can make it 100%. Color, Fill Object. Bring it back down to like 30 or so. Somewhere in there, 20s, 30s is fine. Use a lighter color. Highlight it. Control Shift click to the side. So now let's go with pink for the next color. So we got sort of a strawberry. Control Shift click that ice cream. Color, Fill Object. Okay, bring my intensity back up. Do it again. Color, Fill Object. It just depends on what you want to do here. You could keep it lighter or darker, or do a little highlight color here, and then go with the paint tool. That's a bit much, so I'll bring my intensity down again. Control Shift click to the side, see what that looks like. Not too bad, right? Not too bad. So then we can go with a sort of kind of a ice cream cone color, something like this. Maybe a little bit more like that. Control Shift click the cone. And there we have it. So this is how you can color it with the Polypaint tools. You can also, for example, if you make a mistake and you're wondering like what color is this, just press C and hold it in, and you'll see that the color changes to whatever your mouse is over. Now I also noticed that there's something going on here, but you see what happened where you can see through there? So I'm going to double check to make sure that when I make my subdivision levels back to 1, that goes away, which it should. But it hasn't, has it? So I made a mistake there. You can see through the ice cream. Alright, so that's something that you'd want to go back and fix. So if you notice problems, gotta go back and fix it. But we can try to fix it here by just clicking Control Shift and clicking our Move tool, and then kind of closing this up a bit. Now this may work, it may not. What we can do to test it is go into UV Master again and flatten. So I gotta delete my higher subdivision levels first. So I'm gonna delete higher here in geometry. And then we're gonna click on flatten. And just double check to make sure everything looks okay. Which it seems okay. And then unflatten again. Alright. So I can still see through here. I'm going to kind of move this over. Control Shift click that part. Click off to the side. Okay, so I did lose all my color information there when I worked on the mesh. And so what we wanted to do is I went in there and I moved that mesh around, and when you start moving the mesh around, you start to lose stuff like colors and stuff, which is not fun because you got to recolor everything again, right? So this is why you really want to go through and make sure there's no errors before you paint. Everything has to be pretty much finalized. Now you can't kind of get away with things like moving the mesh after you've painted things and you've made a texture map, which we'll get onto in a bit, but for the most part, if you start to modify things like this, for example, if I go in here and I go to the ZModeler and I click on Insert Edge Loop Complete, okay, so I click here and I insert an edge loop. If you insert edge loops, if you do that after you've made your texture or your UV map, you will have black spots in your final texture. So you can't really do that, but what you can kind of do is you can go into, you can take your ZModeler here and you can click on Slide and then Edge Loop Complete. So like see how I've got, let's say for example we have an avatar where we have an elbow here, so we would usually want to move our geometry like this to where it's more dense where that bend is going to be, right? So you kind of go like that. Something like this. A lot of times if you have a texture map, sliding around stuff doesn't really bother it so much, but what does bother it quite a bit is adding edge loops. So anytime you move stuff too far or you add things like edge loops, you will end up with problems with your texture map, and anything that you've done in here to paint it will be messed up. So like I said, always check to make sure that there's like no holes and your geometry looks good from all angles before you paint. Okay, it's imperative. So we are going to go back to Z plugin. We're going to go to enable control painting, retract from ambient occlusion, and then we can go through the same process again. Okay, so we've painted our model with the basic colors, and again what we want to do is we want to go to geometry. We want to divide it 5 times. Now if you can't divide it 5 times, that's okay. 4 times is pretty good, but 5 times allows for a lot more resolution. Another thing to keep in mind is the more complicated your model and the more parts it has. So for example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts in our subtool that we've merged together. But if you have like 30, some parts will have less detail in the final output. So you want to, like usually if you have a really complicated model, you want to divide it in half. So for example, we might want to have like just the cone by itself and the ice cream by itself with a cherry. So this part would be one section and that could be another section, and that allows you to have more detail in your final texture. So you got to consider that beforehand, what you want to do. So if you want to have like a highly detailed model, make sure that maybe you have like the head is one part and the body is another, because the head might be really important if it's an avatar. That's just something that you might want to consider. So we've divided our model up. We could add super cool details on here, like little sprinkles or whatever we want. We could paint those in. The only thing that I want to recommend is that you consider using like textures literally textured onto our objects. But this is just one way to do it with just the Polypaint. So once you have your stuff on there, you can see that because of the higher geometry levels, you're able to get more detail in your paint, because each little quad gives you the ability to add more information. So the more quads you have, the more paint information is allowed on your object. So here we are at 4 levels of subdivision, and here's 5. So the details are much more crisp that way. So what we could do from here essentially is we could go to texture map and then new from Polypaint. So once we click on this, okay, we click new from Polypaint, then we click on clone texture. What that does is it saves the texture off to the side. Now if I click the texture off to the side, okay, it allows me to export that as a Photoshop document, and I can save that. So I'm going to quickly do that and show you guys what it looks like. So here's our unwrapped texture, and it's in Photoshop, and you can see that the the quality and the detail is pretty high with these little dots that we made and stuff. So we can go in here, we can actually add our own details. Let's just do this in Photoshop and save it. Close Photoshop. So from here, it doesn't automatically update in Photoshop. So I'm going to click on this texture, click on Import. I'm going to find that polysphere texture. And then from there, we can go to click here. Click on our new polysphere here, which is our modified texture. And it will load it back onto our model. So you can see what that looks like after we mess with it in Photoshop. So that's one way to add textures to your model. And from here we could go down to geometry, and we can go back down to our first subdivision level. And because we've the texture is a high quality texture, even though we're down at the subdivision level of 1, you can see that the details remain. So from there we could just go to Tool and Export, and we'll call this Ice Cream. And what it will do is, on my very unorganized desktop, it will create these 3 files. We have ice cream, icecream.mtl, and icecream.obj. So this is an OBJ file. This is the Photoshop document, or bitmap file. And this here was the Photoshop document that I also saved on my desktop here. So when I open this, you can see in Microsoft's OBJ viewer what it looks like. And we can move the light around and stuff. You can see that it's kind of it's not too bad, right, for a simple thing. Okay, so the nice process of we can use to make a texture on our file is to use actual images from Google. And what I did is I just did a quick Google search of ice cream as well as ice cream cone texture, and this is what came up. So we have strawberry chocolate, we have our mint, and we have our cone color. So we're going to go and we're going to apply those here to our stuff. And so we want to make sure that, again, we have a higher subdivision level, so make sure you're dividing at least wait a sec. So I'm actually going to delete what we have here. So what to do? I guess that's okay. Actually, you know what? We can just probably overwrite this, but what we'll do is we'll go to texture, texture off, and we'll go to texture map, and I believe that's all we need to do, but let me just go to my subtool and go color, go to white, and fill object. Okay. Yep, so that's cleared the texture, and we've cleared the color information that we just had. Now, of course, there's a lot of there's actually still problems with this mesh, unfortunately. But you can see, like, just making a tutorial, I'm not trying to be thorough, and I didn't catch this little hole under there. But anyway, we're gonna go to we are going to need to import our textures. So let's go to texture, import, and I'm gonna go to my ice cream, not Krita. I'm going to import our mint and our strawberry and everything else. Whoops, import, texture, import, texture, import, down here, and then find your texture and just double click it. And you'll see that we have all the textures loaded in here. So the next step is to go to spotlight mode. So after we've imported a texture, we click on texture, select our texture. Probably don't want it to look like wood, but we'll use the chocolate this time. And we're going to click on, after we select this, we're going to click on add to spotlight here. And now this thing comes up. Okay, this is the spotlight. I'm going to zoom out, but I can't, right? So it seems like, what's going on here? I can't zoom out of this large texture, and I'm sort of moving the ice cream behind there. It seems really weird. But you'll notice that when you go over your wheel, there's different things that pop up. And what we're going to actually look for is it's kind of hard to see what it says here, isn't it? Let's change the opacity down so we can see what the heck we're doing. But we need to find scale. So we got rotate, scale. Let's scale that down. Okay. Let's turn the opacity back up. We also need to rotate this a bit. So how can we do that? So there's a rotate. Let's see. Let's put this off to the side. So if you click off to the side, your wheel will go wherever that is. And if you right click, you'll actually be able to move your texture and the wheel at the same time. So that's how you control these. But we want to rotate it. There it is. This is rotate. So let's rotate our chocolate sort of in the angle we want. And then right click and move it into place. Also make sure that your paintbrush is selected. So we also want to make sure that our opacity and intensity and whatnot is 100. But we could bring that down if we wanted to, if you just wanted to make it a very subtle texture, but for this demonstration it's going to be 100. So if you want to hide your spotlight, you would click on Z. So you press Z, make sure that your paint tool or your focal shift and everything is where you want it. I'm going to click Control Shift and click on the ice cream, and I'm going to paint over everything. Now I'm going to click my ice cream, move it into position here. Let's put it all the way like this. So you'll notice that I have a certain angle that I want to try to get on this ice cream. Sort of like this, like the striations are going to go this direction. I really can't talk and chew gum at the same time. Sorry. Hopefully I'm making sense though. But you want to just left click with your paint tool, go over it, turn it again, move it into the right angle, move it into place, and then paint it. Okay, that's basically it. And so if we move it out to the side, like maybe it looks a little bit weird here, so we're just gonna like make our tool smaller, paint it like right in the middle. So we kind of have sharp ice cream details there. And we'll just get the top. Whoops. I need to do that. Get the top. Maybe get the bottom. Again, if you were, following the tutorial before, you would want to delete that geometry in the top and the bottom. But there you have it. Now we're going to open up our spotlight again. And, let's see. So now we've gotten that. We can click Control-Shift-Click. Or, sorry, click Z to get rid of that. Control-Shift-Click. Now we see our ice cream again. But then we want to add another texture. And then we want to paint, let's say, this part with our mint green color. So we know that we have our texture in here. It's there. We go to, we press go to texture. And then we have our mint green ice cream here. And then we add it to the spotlight. But a bad thing happens where we have two textures now. We've got the chocolate and we've got the mint. So what we want to do is we want to delete this chocolate one. We want to get it out of the way. So you want to left click on your texture, and then on here is a delete option, and that will delete your texture from the tool itself. And then once that's gone, we can get back to we click Control Shift and click on our press Z first and then Control Shift click on our part, move it into place. And this could be made smaller or larger. We can press Z and we can sort of scale things the way we want it. Again, we could fade it, we could duplicate it, there's all kinds of options here. The main one that I like to use is just rotate and then just move it into place. So sort of like this. So I'm going to press Z and I'm going to paint that right on our model. That. Press Z, left click on the texture, click delete, Control Shift click off to the side, and all we have left is the cherry. So with the cherry, I'm just going to use, I'm just going to color that with some red paint. So I'm going to go color, fill object, press S, shrink it down a bit, and again I'll just add a little highlight, make my intensity low. Oops, it's a bit much. A little highlight there. And there we have our ice cream. So from here what we'll do is we will do what we did before with just the polypainting texture, but we'll go to texture map, new or create from, let's see, new from Polypaint, I guess, I believe, yes. Okay, there it is. So there's our texture. That's what it looks like if it were to be unwrapped. So one last final tip before you export is make sure that you are in your lower subdivision level. So if you're at subdivision level 5 here, you're at 454,000 active points, but in subdivision number 1 is only 1,810, which is obviously what you want to use. So from there you would go to Tool and then Export as your OBJ. Okay, so once you have your ice cream object sort of loaded up, and you can check it out in Microsoft OBJ Viewer, and you can see that we can turn it, the textures are all working. If you're happy with the seam lines and everything else is falling into place. So this is basically ready for importing into VRChat through Unity, or if you need to add bones or something like that in Blender, you can do that with this object already. But what we want to do is we want to just kind of go over the fact that you can alter these textures in a paint program. So I'm going to close this. Now to do that, we have our texture files here. So this is our bitmap, and we have our OBJ and the other information file here, the MTL. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually copy the ice cream file. I'm just going to paste it onto my desktop and rename it ice cream old. I'm going to put that right back in my folder. So I have ice cream and ice cream old. So I'm going to edit the first document in Photoshop. So I've got it loaded up here. And what I want to do is I want to add, let's say, just blue sprinkles on our mint ice cream here. So I'm going to zoom in. Now, this is the simple way to do it. There's more complicated ways to do this, but we're just going to add some sprinkles. Not really sure where these sprinkles are falling, because I'm sure that parts of this are hidden by the other, like the chocolate and the strawberry, but you can see kind of like what this looks like. So we'll just do that. We'll add some yellow. Again, this is just for, this is not perfect, but you can see that this is how you would edit your texture file. Sort of like this. And you can add as many colors as you want, maybe some red sprinkles. It's going to be the weirdest ice cream cone ever, but hey, it works, right? Something like that. So we got our, you can like take the text tool and you can write text, you know, on there or whatever you want. We're just going to save as, or just save as ice cream.bitmap. Save it and overwrite it. Yes. 24-bit Windows. Okay. Close Photoshop and check it out. Oh, what happened there? Okay, so I discovered that Microsoft's OBJ viewer doesn't really like if the name of the texture is too similar. So we have ice cream and ice cream old. So when I tried to load it up, it just won't load up that new texture that we made. So let's rename this one here old ice cream. And that's our original copy. So this way, if we mess something up, you know, we do have a copy to fall back on. And if we try to load it up now, it does recognize the texture bitmap that we just altered in Photoshop. So that's how you alter textures after you've created them, you know, within ZBrush. And you can add text. You can try to, you know, put an image on there if you had to, if it was a flat plane or something and wanted to post, you know, something off, something that you painted, or maybe from Google Images. You can do so. All you got to keep in mind though is that the text and textures and whatnot might stretch due to the geometry of the way that the image wraps around your object. So always keep that in mind. But that's basically how you would you know, alter your or hone in your details and finalize, you know, the look of your 3D object using Photoshop or Krita or any other kind of free program. Okay, so we are going to load up our or import into Blender our object. So I'm going to click on Import Wavefront OBJ and go on my desktop and look for ice cream and ice cream OBJ. And I'm going to go into viewport shading mode, and there we have it. So we could do a quick render here, and that's what it's going to look like. See, I think we might be too close to our object. Yeah, I think so. Let's move this back a bit. See how this is angled. Render image. And there we have it. So obviously the camera's a bit close, but you can see that it does work. Blender does recognize it, and you could add bones to this or whatever you wanted to do. It's totally acceptable. Would definitely work. And so anyway, I just want to thank everybody for watching. I know this is not the most perfect of tutorials, but good luck with your projects, and see you next time.